Welcome back to Fast Market here on Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside Tom White in our Chicago studio. Time now for our cash tag segment, taking a look at Apple today. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that is Landon Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio. Landon, thank you so much for joining us ahead of the holiday. I know a lot of people are on the road and traveling, so we do certainly appreciate you bringing your latest data. So I was in an Apple store this week because I had to get a couple devices looked at. And it shows a couple devices need to be replaced because they're like pandemic era devices. I'm curious to know what your data shows about Apple currently.
Yeah, I mean, this is a key time of the year. You know, they just had their keynote a couple months ago, which is we're always watching that very closely. We can actually get a really good read on how the consumer's reacting to the upgrade cycle over the next year just from that September keynote. And I can tell you what it looks like. I mean, first of all, obviously the iPhone is the most important product that they have, and that is doing really well. We're looking at probably around plus 10%, maybe 12% on a year-over-year basis. Whereas most smartphones are in the plus 3% range. So iPhone is definitely doing its job for Apple. And I think the market kind of knows that. I mean, if you look at how well the stock is trading, it's really crushing it right now. Very, very high numbers. And so I think everyone kind of knows that the iPhone's doing extremely well this cycle. Now, the other products, iPad's actually the biggest on a year-over-year basis at plus 32%. Very big numbers coming from it. AirPods much smaller in scale, but they're also plus 30%. The Mac is actually a little bit weaker, and I think it has more to do with the comps. So Mac's about plus 8%. And I think it's got tough comps versus 2024. Last year, was the beginning of what you might call vibe coding. Everybody wanted to get a new laptop and try some things out that they couldn't do before. So there was a lot more sales last year. So it's a tough comp for the Mac. The watch is by far the weakest. It's actually negative on a year-over-year basis. I think it's one of the only products that's actually negative on a year-over-year basis. But, that's kind of a footnote because everyone's looking at how well the iPhone's doing. And, I think for the first time in 14 years, they're going to ship more iPhones than Samsung. So I know that in the U.S., everybody's got an iPhone, but that's not the case worldwide. But this year, Apple is winning that battle on a number of units sold, number of units shipped. So overall, the data is very strong for Apple. The market's very strong for Apple. I don't know if we have a huge edge data-wise because everything just looks so rosy. I mean, the stock's at all-time highs, the data's at all-time highs. This is just a company that's kicking butt. There are concerns. Obviously, China is a concern both as a market and as, potential tariffs. You've got concerns with them falling behind in the AI race. Their CapEx is much, much lower than a lot of their competition. Siri is really far behind when it comes to, AI and interacting with AI, the user experience. So they got to put some money into that, and investors are looking for Siri to be, quote, fixed to where it can compete with GPT and others. So, there's some hurdles, I think, but overall, this is a pretty strong company with pretty strong data. It's hard to not like them here. I'd like them better if they were 250 or 240, but at 280, I think they're fairly priced.
Yeah, Landon, that's what I was going to kind of hit on, that data that you show where the stock price is basically tracking the positive data that you guys have. But when you look at this, the super cycle that they've been, talking about for the past 3 maybe iterations of the phone, maybe coming to fruition here a little bit. You've seen China sales actually pick up a little bit, so that's been the next leg up for this stock. But they don't need AI, do they, Landon? Because they're the tool that everybody uses AI with. But at the same time, do you guys feel or see in any of your data that nobody's getting rid of their iPhone or their products anytime soon? So maybe that CapEx spend, that low level, is actually a boon for them moving forward. And then, hey, they got all this cash sitting on the sidelines. They can just buy Perplexity or somebody else if they really want to ramp that up, right?
I completely agree. I mean, so this is a company that has a formula for just cranking out cash, right? And so they've got a lot of money sitting in the bank, and they're not spending a lot compared to their peers. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know that they need their AI to be the best because, On my iPhone, I can go to GPT, I can go to Perplexity, I can use Grok, I can use whatever I want. So it's not like it's a limiting factor. It would be nice if for Apple investors, it would be nice if they owned the best one. They own probably one of the worst ones in Siri, but you can use all of the best ones on your iPhone. So they've got their formula and they're kind of sticking to it. Just referring to this chart like you talked about, blue line's the data, basically consumer demand, and the dotted line is the stock price. Now the note here, it almost looks like the blue line is trailing, but you got to remember that's a 90-day moving average where the stock price is a day-by-day tick. So if you do day-by-day ticks of both of them or 90-day moving average of both of them, you'd see that they're moving right in line, and probably demand is slightly leading on the data, and it's at all-time highs, like I said, just like the stock. So everything's kind of tracking for this company, and you're right. I think they have options in the future to, if they feel like they need to spend more money to increase their technology, AI and whatnot, sure. But they're just in such a good spot right now where they've figured out how to make a lot of money. A lot of these companies that are trying to make money in AI wish they had a product like the iPhone, right? That you can just release one every year and everybody goes out and upgrades. It's an incredible system that they've got. So I put it in the threat category, but it's just more of a footnote concern that they can definitely correct in the future if needed with all that cash, like you said.
Okay, it's interesting that you say that. I hear your point about putting the threat in the threat category, but it sounds like it's a low-level risk because, for instance, the technician who helped me, I asked something about AI, and he said, we hate AI. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I wondered if that was just his view or kind of a general viewpoint within Apple. And I remember back to an earnings call, I want to say this was probably a couple years ago, the early days of us talking more about generative AI, and Tim Cook saying on the earnings call, basically, we've been there already. We already have AI. When you think then about any risk factors for Apple, is it just about price where it is right now?
Yeah, price and potentially China tariffs, things like that. I mean, they have such a sticky ecosystem. They have an incredible advantage that when you own one product, you own the iPhone and you go get the earbuds or the iPad or whatever it may be, the watch, it just works. It always just works. You're talking to somebody who was a Samsung guy for a long time or a Google guy, and I tell you, it was way more customizable with those platforms versus Apple, but everything just works on Apple and it's easy. And I think they just have an unbelievable sticky ecosystem. It's hard to find a big threat. I mean, I would love it if Elon would come out with the Tesla phone or the Grok phone or whatever and compete a little bit. But they're just far and away, at least in the U.S., far and away, head and shoulders above everyone else. And now, like I said, they've just surpassed Samsung for the first time in 14 years on deliveries for those phones. So they're starting to take, bite into that lead, the worldwide lead. So, the threats, I think, are just, is the price too high? As an investor, that's what you have to think. As a company, the threat, there's not a long list of those. And again, the CapEx is an issue if you look at how much everybody else is spending, but they've got so much money in the bank. Like Tom said, they can correct that problem in one quarter by just buying the winner. They can just wait and see if Perplexity is the winner and say, all right, we'll take Perplexity. And then all of a sudden, Apple's got one of the best AIs there is. So yeah, it's tough to think of a lot of downsides to Apple. The only one is the stock price is just so high. Pullback looks better to me here, but I think it's fairly priced.
Landon, when you look at this, I keep on hearing these rumblings, out of OpenAI and some others. I'm not sure if you guys have any data or any inklings about what's going on, that the next iterations of AI in the next 5 years might not be the phone that you use. It might be glasses. It might be something else. Are you guys hearing anything where that could potentially be a headwind for Apple down the road?
I mean, you're getting into some pretty futuristic stuff. I think the phone is just so iconic. It's going to be tough for people to get away from that. Now, I think 5 years is too short of a time frame for something like that. I think you fast forward 5 or 10 or 15 years, maybe. But the phone in your hand is just, you can just do things you can't do with glasses or who knows what else in the future. And like you said, who says that Apple's limited to a phone, right? I mean, I think that if that new technology comes out and it is clearly a winner and people want to adopt it, whether it's classes or whatever, they can acquire that or they can build it. I mean, they're obviously very good at building new technology that is sleek and innovative and that people love to use. So, and the thing about that is if they do come out with something like that, it'll just work and it'll be sticky within their ecosystem. So I think that they kind of have the advantage of sitting back and seeing what wins in the market and then just jumping in. I mean, again, back to when I was a Samsung owner, they were way more advanced than the iPhone. And then when the iPhone would copy what they had 2 or 3 years later, all the iPhone people were going crazy about this new feature. I was like, we've had that for 3 years, but that's what they can do. They have that advantage is they can just wait, see what's great, and either invent it or buy it, and then release it to all their customers. So they have that advantage of having so many customers that are ready and waiting for the next update. I don't think they need to be out in the lead, spending a ton of money and doing a bunch of research when they've got the advantage that they do. The only other threat potentially is the Tim Cook. We'll see what happens there. There's some rumors. I think they've got to be very careful with what happens if he leaves, who replaces him, and all of that. But I'm sure that they're going to handle that well.
That's a good point about the leadership there. But great perspective there. Thank you, Landon. That's Landon Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, with the latest look across Apple. And happy Thanksgiving to Landon. Okay, so the trading perspective.